So I went hiking on a trail that is well known for seeing other hikers or mountain bikers, and it's not uncommon. While I was walking up the trail, I happened to come across a girl who seemed kind of out of place, like she was not quite dressed right for hiking, but not totally in wrong attire either. As I get closer, about 10 to 15 feet, I call out, "Hey, how's it going?" Half to let her know that I was behind her so I didn't surprise her when I caught up, and half because she was, well, kind of cute. She looks back and says, "Well, not bad. How about yourself?" I catch up to her, telling her not too bad and great weather for hiking and all that. As we walk up this trail, we chat, and she's a very giggly person. We continue talking and walking for about 10 minutes or so when she stops me and says, "Do you want to see a meadow that I found before? It's kind of off the offbeat trail, but it's really pretty to see." Now, normally I wouldn't follow some stranger into the woods for who knows how far to find a meadow that may or may not really be there, but I'll admit that I was charmed by her and she was very attractive and fit my idea of the perfect girl. Also, she was short, like 5'1" or 5'2", so I wasn't really afraid of her or anything. So I said, "Yeah, you know what, sure, we've got plenty of daylight to get back, so let's go." She throws her hands up and goes, "Yeah, let's go," and she grabs my hand and pulls me into the woods. As I bumble through the woods, she's ahead of me dancing through them, hiding behind the trees and peeking out the other side and then laughing and keeps on going. Thinking back why it never occurred to me that this girl is literally gracefully bounding through the woods like a deer, while I'm stumbling through like a drunken prom date, I'll never know why I didn't recognize that. We've been going through the woods for maybe about close to 20-ish minutes, and I can see that the trees are starting to thin out, and beyond that it's an empty field, about 20 yards away. So I pick up my pace and catch up to her. I'm about 6 feet from her when she says, "Come on, just past this tree." She looks at me and steps behind the tree, like she's been doing during this woods walk, so I run to the tree and say, "Let's see if we can pick the same side to jump out. Ready, go." And she's gone. And I mean, she has just literally disappeared. There is nowhere where this girl could have gone past that tree because on the other side was literally an open field. I have never had a cold spike of fear hit me so hard before. I was freaking out. My heart was pounding, the hair on my body was standing on end, a cold sweat suddenly came over me, and I was scared so bad that I was frozen for what felt like forever. Then I heard her giggle. Well, that was enough for me. I turned around and I ran so fast that Usain Bolt couldn't have caught me. How I found my way back to the trail is beyond me, but even after I hit the trail, I just didn't stop running. I ran back down that trail until I literally started seeing black specks from a lack of oxygen. I've told this story to 4 people only. One believed me, but the others, well, I'm not really so sure. I still have no idea what was actually going on there that day, and I refuse to go back there. I've always dreamed of living alone, and after years of roommates and cramped apartments, I finally had my own house, a modest place on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, I'll admit, but it was mine. Surrounded by rolling fields and the occasional cluster of trees, the house felt like a bit of a sanctuary. It was quiet, peaceful, and isolated. Exactly what I needed. The first week was bliss too. I spent my days arranging furniture, unpacking boxes, and marveling at how much space I suddenly had. At night, I'd curl up with a book or a glass of wine, relishing the silence, and the world just left far away, and I loved it. Until the third night. I was closing the curtains in the living room when I noticed something outside. At the edge of the field, near the tree line, stood a faint figure. It was hard to make out in the dim light, just a dark outline against the pale grass. I squinted though, trying to determine if it was a person, but it didn't move. It just sort of stood there, completely still. Probably a scarecrow, I muttered to myself, though I didn't remember seeing one earlier. Still, I shrugged it off and pulled the curtain shut. The next night I saw it again, though. This time it seemed closer too, maybe halfway across the field. My stomach tightened as I stared at it. It still didn't move. No swaying in the wind, no shifting of limbs, just a static humanoid shape. I tried to ignore it, but my unease grew with each passing moment now. I told myself that it was just my imagination or a trick of the light or something. Maybe it was a tree stump I hadn't noticed before, but deep down I knew that it wasn't true. By the end of the week, it was only a few yards from the house now. I stopped going near the windows after dark. During the day, I'd venture outside to look for any sign of footprints or disturbances in the grass, but there was never anything. The field was untouched as well, as if no one had been there, like ever. I started sleeping with the lights on now, every door locked and bolted. I even bought blackout curtains to block out the sight of the field entirely, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One night, too, I woke up with a bit of a start. My room was bathed in faint moonlight, and for a moment, everything seemed normal, but then I saw it. It was standing at the foot of my bed. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The figure was clearer now, no longer just a distant outline, and it was tall, impossibly tall, with elongated limbs and a head that tilted unnaturally to one side. Its features were indistinct, as though its face was shrouded in shadow despite the moonlight streaming through the window. I wanted to scream, to move, to do anything, but my body refused to obey. It stood there motionless, just like it had in the field. My mind raced, searching for an explanation, but none came. This wasn't a dream. I could feel the cold sweat dripping down my back, the pounding of my heart in my chest. Then, slowly, it moved. Its head tilted further, the angle grotesque and unnatural. It leaned closer, and though I couldn't see its eyes, I felt its gaze pierce through me. A faint sound escaped its throat, a low, guttural noise that sent shivers instantly down my spine. And then, well, I really don't remember much after that, because the next thing that I knew, it was morning. I was still in bed, the room flooded with sunlight now. The figure was gone, but that unease definitely lingered. I spent the day searching the house, looking for any sign that someone had been inside. Nothing was out of place. The doors were still locked, the windows closed. But I knew what I had seen, and I also knew that it probably wasn't over. That night, I sat in the living room with every light on, clutching a kitchen knife. The hours dragged on, and the silence became oppressive. Midnight came and went, and I began to think that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But then, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the window behind me. In a stroke of courage, I quickly got up and opened the blinds, but when I did, nothing was there. Since then, I have decided that I'm going to move out from this place, because there is something here, and something is very wrong. This happened close to 12 years ago now, and frankly, since then, I have not been able to stop thinking about it. I've had several other experiences throughout my life due to my line of work, in the theological orthopraxy space, but really nothing like this. So I was 16 at the time, and went over to a buddy's house way out in the country in the Boston Mountains of Arkansas to play D&D with a group of 6 buddies on a summer night. The friend's parents were large animal vets and so had a large ranch with lots of cleared ground space for the animals to walk around and graze on while they cared for them. After a rousing 8-hour session of D&D, we decided to call it a night, near or just past midnight. Myself and 2 others, referred to as S and G from here on in, took the guest bedroom, which had a glass door or wall, which normally you would go out onto the deck of the second story, but they were about to replace the deck and had torn down the old one. So, I'm in bed, S is on a cot, and G is on a yoga mat and a pile of blankets for a bed. As we're all settling in to lay down for the night, and just before I close my eyes, I see what looks like a flash of light from out down the hill. The glass door looked down into a hollow that had been cleared, except for some sparse trees. Honestly, I thought nothing of it, until S mentioned that he had seen it too, which woke up G. We all 3 sat up and watched this blue, sort of white orb pulse with energy and move in a rhythmic pattern until G goes, "Holy heck, there's another one." And another one appeared, doing a similar pulse movement pattern as the first. As we sat there and watched for, I would say, the next hour, there ended up being about 10 or 15 of these that appeared, all doing the pulsing and the movement. It's now 1 a.m, and we're all trying to figure out what the heck is going on. These orbs are between 30 yards at the closest and 60 yards at the farthest from us. And I guess in hindsight, the odd thing was that we never really felt scared or cold or any of the spooky feelings that you normally get with stories like this, but had actually started somewhat joking about it. We all felt sort of super light and giggly and happy, almost high, I would say. We had consumed nothing, by the way, but cheap Harps brand Coke all day. About after an hour and a half of watching these things like we were in a trance, S goes, "What's that?" And from the other side of the holler, you could see something coming down and then start to walk up the hill towards us. And it was absolutely huge. And look, I'm embarrassed to even say this, but it was what appeared to be an 8-foot-tall goat man is the best way that I can describe it, with almost glowing eyes, and it honestly looked sort of beautiful and glowing in its own way. As he walked up the hill, the orbs parted, and he stopped about 30 yards from us, staring at us for some time, and then pointed at us. Though all of us were dead silent, there was a palpable sense of be calm, be still, and be happy, and do not show any fear. Then, it just left back the way that it came. The orbs kept dancing around and pulsing for some time after that, and then they started to disappear one at a time. We all sat there dumbfounded, and we got absolutely no sleep that night, so when we got up to get some breakfast with the rest of the guys, they asked us why we all looked so exhausted, and we all just kind of, looked at each other, I guess, not knowing how to even start to answer that question. Years later, I've talked to both S and G about this experience, and their responses have always been the same. S is now a devout Catholic and thinks that what we saw was entirely demonic, and even the thought of it makes him not sleep at night, so please never bring it up again, is what he says. And G, he's a pretty hardcore atheist and says that he doesn't like to think about it and thinks that it was a shared hallucination. And then there's me, who, honestly, I have no idea what it was. You may not believe me in the slightest, and honestly I don't blame you, but if you do have any information on what this could have been, whether that be anything from folklore to aliens or whatever, then please do share it, as I am really desperate to find out some reference to, well, anything like this. You know, it can be hard for men to deal with their hair loss, even though it's pretty common. Luckily though, I'm here to provide you with a solution, so you don't even have to really talk about it. Through Hims, you can restore your hair by accessing their personalized hair loss solutions. Hims provides you with convenient and quality access to a range of hair loss treatments that work, and all from the comfort of your own couch. Hims makes treating hair loss simple, with doctor-trusted options and clinically proven ingredients that can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. Choose from personalized chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatments to find what works best for you. The process is simple and 100% online, so there are no uncomfortable doctor's visits. Answer a few questions and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to you for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Hims has hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, and they can help you get your confidence back too, with visibly thicker and fuller hair. So start your online visit today at hims.com/scared. That's HIMS.com/scared for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/scared. Please do keep in mind that results vary. Based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride, prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. For some background, my father grew up in a country where it's mostly farms and agriculture. Houses are very far apart, except for a few villages, and this event would have taken place sometime in the mid-late 80s. And as has been explained to me by both my parents, it was around this time that there weren't any phone lines, just street lights, and really, that's about it. Now, my father started working around the age of 9. He would go down to the villages or centers in order to sell or deliver vegetables, as my grandparents grew vegetables like lettuce, tomatoes, and more. He would very often stay out late, as he would be required to deliver vegetables to several restaurants. And one night, as he was heading back, a herd of goats was obstructing the road. To put this into perspective as well, he uses a little carriage like the ones ice cream vendors tend to use in Hispanic countries. So he couldn't just scoot by, as his carriage was being blocked as well. But then, from behind him, he heard a voice state, "How much for a lettuce, young man?" And when my father turned around, he says that he saw a 10-foot tall man who looked really skinny, bordering on malnourished with pale skin. He couldn't completely see his face, but he stated that from the little that he could see, his face was very sunken. The man was wearing overalls with a flannel shirt, a bandana on his neck, and a straw hat. I know that the description sounds very stereotypical, but again, this does take place in the deep country, like an hour away from any city or town. According to my father, though, the straw hat casted a shadow, and thus he couldn't see the man's eyes. However, he could see his sunken cheeks and crooked teeth when he talked. My father was obviously weirded out, but due to how young he was, in his early teens, around 10 to 13, he just sort of assumed it was a very tall man, instead of something paranormal or something weird that he should have been afraid of. Thus, my father said the price and the man paid. My father handed him a piece of lettuce, which, according to him, the man was able to hold with one hand comfortably. As the man walked away with the lettuce, according to my father, the man whistled and the goats followed the man. My father then just headed home. If he did tell my grandma or anybody else like that, I'm still not sure if he specified everything. As I said before, this took place decades ago, and the area that this took place in was very isolated with no houses nearby. To explain the area a little bit better, a lot of oil palm trees are grown there. Thus, there are areas where you won't see a house for a few miles even, and all you'll see are just huge banks of oil palm trees. As for how he knew that he was 10 feet, well, it was a guess, but he states that he was as tall as the ceiling of the house that we were in when he told the story, and the ceiling was pretty high. At least 10 feet is my guess. Whatever the case may be, he is certain that he was abnormally huge, like way larger than any human should be. I heard this story a few months ago, but I just found out about this place, so I decided to share it here since it's always intrigued me a lot. So if you have any questions, then please don't be shy to ask. I have plenty of stories like these, due to my family growing up in the deep country, and plenty of relatives stating that they've seen weird things here, but are they true? Well, I'm not sure, but I like to talk about them and think about them. I have been told that they are fact by many people, so if you want to hear them, then I would be happy to share them too. I was 24 at the time, and so was my husband. Our daughter was 2 at the time, and we were on a road trip to go and see family, and about 20-ish minutes outside of the town that we lived in was this big gas station with a wide variety of snacks. Whenever we go on a trip, we would always stop there for gas, drinks, and snacks. It was the middle of the day in the middle of summer, and so we pull in and hubby finds a pump to fill up. We'd all gone to the bathroom before leaving the house, so I left our daughter in the car while he filled up and went inside to fill our water bottles and grab some snacks. Like I said, this gas station was fairly large for the area, but not like huge or anything. The bathrooms and the water fountain, with like the water bottle filler thing, were down a fairly secluded hallway. There was only one cashier and the line was kind of long, so I decided to buy the snacks first and then go into the hallway to fill the water bottles on the way out, in case the line got any longer. Meanwhile, my husband had finished pumping gas and pulled into a parking spot in front of the building to wait for me. But all of the windows were covered with posters and stuff, so I really didn't notice this. Anyway, while I was in line, holding our snacks and water bottles in my arms, a couple of guys immediately get in line behind me. They were tall. I'm like 5'10", which is tall for a woman, I suppose, but I'd estimate that they were 6 foot at least. They wore very nondescript clothes, khaki shorts and black-grey t-shirts. I didn't hear them speak any English, and I cannot 100% confirm what language they spoke, but it sounded Middle Eastern. I should add too that they were Caucasian. Not that their skin tone or mine matter at all, but I decided to add this since I'm sure that I might be accused of being racist or whatever. Anyway, not super unusual for the area because there was a big college town nearby. Now, especially after having my daughter, I don't like anyone being directly behind me, even family, so I turned to these guys, and they were in my peripheral vision, and looked at a display of kids' toys while I waited. I do this move a lot when I'm waiting in line, and basically every time, nobody notices or cares that I turn, so I see people or whatever, and they certainly don't move around while waiting in line nearly as much as these guys did. But one of them was just fully staring at me, and his expression was just plain unsettling. But he hadn't done anything, so I just sort of smiled, gave a half nod and looked away while still keeping them in the field of view. They were whispering among themselves, even though nobody could understand their language, and it wasn't exactly quiet in there either, but I just had this gut feeling that they were talking about me because they both kept openly staring at me, and nobody else, even though it was fairly busy. Then they started moving so that they were directly behind me, and for 4 minutes straight, I looked at my phone every time that I moved because I was uncomfortable with them directly behind me. They'd move to be directly behind me again as well. Every time that they would look at something on display, but it just seemed really forced, like they weren't actually interested in the unicorn toys that they were looking at, and were just sort of looking at them to get behind me. About every 15 seconds for 4 minutes while we were in this line, it kept happening over and over. They'd even go back and look at something that they'd already looked at. They went back to the same unicorn toy at least 4 times. I felt like I was crazy, because, maybe one of them has a daughter or a niece who would like it or whatever, but every time I looked close enough, they were always staring at me, watching me. I was seriously freaked out, but I kept telling myself that they weren't after me or anything. But just to be safe, I decided not to go and fill the water bottles and to just go straight back to the car, and it just wasn't worth the risk. I was still 3 people away from the front of the line at this point. There was some sort of an issue with a membership card that held the line up or something, and more people had lined up behind the men. One was a middle-aged woman and her teenager, 13 to 14-ish. The woman saw my discomfort and saw how they kept getting behind me over and over, so she sent her teenager to see if the self-checkouts were open. At this gas station, it was like a 50-50 chance that they were. What I mean is that they went down a lot. Meanwhile, those men were getting closer and closer. I'd already gotten as close to the person in front of me as socially allowed, but they were now breathing down my neck, and even brushing up against me while they looked at the displays of candy and unicorn toys. I was contemplating leaving the snacks on the counter and just walking out, when the teenager came back and must have whispered to the woman that the self-checkout was open. Then the woman walked up to me, took me by my arm and led me to the self-checkout. We watched each other's backs while we checked out. I looked up and saw them still staring at me, and this time they looked really angry. They were about to come and talk to me, it seemed, when she grabbed my bag and receipt for me and walked me out to my car. Somehow she was just so smooth with everything. I don't even think her teenager noticed what was going on. Once we were outside, I saw my car right there with hubby and my kid inside. I gave her a hug and thanked her for her help getting me out of there, and then we parted ways. I told my hubby about everything, trying not to get too emotional about it, just stating facts about what they did and how they behaved. He seemed equally freaked out by my description of the events, though, and wished that he had the chance to probably thank that woman. I filled out our water bottles at the next gas station, and we moved out of that area, probably about 6 months later. So, really, that woman is my hero, and I am very thankful that she was there that day. I really don't think that I can fully describe how deeply uncomfortable that situation was. I was genuinely scared that they'd follow me to my car or something, and if they had, I really don't know what I would have done. For context, I'm female and I was probably about 19 years old at this time. So years ago, I was out walking my dog. I worked late, so I usually had to walk him when it was already dark out. There weren't a lot of times where I really felt unsafe though, despite my dog Reese being very mild-tempered and unlikely to defend me in a bad situation. And this, despite my dog Reese being very mild-tempered and unlikely to defend me in a bad situation. This was a middle-class suburban Texas neighborhood, and I had been walking my dogs there basically all my life. Now, I remembered that it had rained recently and the yard lights that most everyone had on were reflecting off of the puddles, giving everything a kind of dreamy feel. I don't know if anyone will know what I'm talking about when I say this, but yard lights sometimes make it harder to see at night, especially with them reflecting off of the puddles like that. You can see into the areas that are lit, but the light kind of messes with your eyes, leaving black shadows if you're trying to look beyond the light where you really can't see a thing. Anyway, despite being in a well-populated area, most people were asleep at this stage, or at least quietly in their houses by that time, so it could be quite solitary out here. I mean, you'd occasionally pass another quiet dog walker, but certainly not every night, and if so, only one. And while Reese didn't care who he passed, my previous dog was very reactive to other dogs, and sometimes even people on his walks, and would create a lot of embarrassing barking. Despite him having passed away at this point, I was still trained to watch for anyone that we might encounter and make a quick turn down a cul-de-sac or something just to keep the peace. So I'm walking along, looking up at the stars and thinking about random things when suddenly I think that I see a shadowy movement way up the road. It's a little far off to truly tell, but regardless, there's nowhere to turn anyway, so I just keep walking, and Reese continues on with his inception of mailbox smells. Oh, I suppose I should mention too that this is a two-way, a single lane for traffic going either direction, a road with no sidewalks, and we haven't passed a single car for the entire night. Now, by this point, I can tell that it's an adult human with no dog walking towards me. With how dark it is, normally I wouldn't be able to tell if they were walking towards or away from me, but they have a giveaway and they're wearing glasses and I can see the light reflecting off of them. With still nowhere to turn off, and I don't particularly want to just turn around and just have this person just forever be behind me the rest of the walk, I decided in the end to just pass them and get it over with. It's still not great in terms of visibility, but I'm now thinking that this person is a tall man. I couldn't say what truly led me to that conclusion, but it does enter my mind that this is a lone male and I'm a lone female, and despite being surrounded by people, we feel very alone. Reese is there and I love him of course, but like I said, I don't know that he's got my back at all, and I'm suddenly thinking about that out of the blue. We're now almost at the point of being directly passing each other. The silent man and I are going one way down the road and the other on the other side, going the opposite direction obviously. And right at that moment of passing, Reese's ears perk and he tugs on his leash towards the stranger with his tail at alert. The man suddenly stops and does something so minor and yet so very creepy at the same time. He starts walking backwards, matching our pace completely, and Reese loses his mind and starts barking and yanking on his leash towards the man in a way that I've never seen him before or since do. My brain is just kind of jumping around with being confused, embarrassed at my poorly behaved dog. I'm struggling to control him, and weirdly, I'm also scared, I think. Like, my hair is standing on end for reasons that I really just cannot explain. Like, instinct is screaming that this isn't okay, while I stare at the shadowy figure walking silently backwards at an alarmingly fast pace as well. Head turned slightly towards me, glasses reflecting yard lights. Suddenly, we reach a break in the road that turns to a better lit area with more traffic, and I immediately drag Reese down it. After walking several feet, I glance over my shoulder at the creep, and I saw nothing. Which means that it's either too dark to see his path on the shadowy street, or, well, he disappeared. It's hard to say, but Reese stopped his racket as soon as we made the sudden turn, but he keeps his attention on the road that we came from. He is suddenly weird and annoying and on constant alert the rest of the uneventful walk home. I'm obviously totally creeped out and cut through to the shortest route home ASAP. I never did see that weirdo again, but honestly, I have no idea what that was all about. So, do you have any thoughts? I've heard theories that maybe it was a skinwalker, maybe just a jerk just trying to be funny. Maybe it was something else. I really don't know, and I would really love to hear your theories. I'm a pretty scientific person. I love everything psychology and science, things grounded in reality. I also believe in the paranormal, but I'm pretty skeptical unless I'm given good reason to believe otherwise. So, this particular incident was, well, strange, and I still cannot really explain it to this day. I've had a lot of experiences through my life, but this one really stands out even now. I apologize if things are a little bit vague at times. I have issues with my memory recall, but I'll do my best to explain and describe what I can remember. So, this was way back in 2018. I feel old even saying that. I was 18 and visiting someone that I was dating at the time. We were at a friend of his house for their birthday, and I think it was his birthday anyway, and things were relatively normal as far as I remember. There was a small group of us. It wasn't a very big gathering by any means, and it was nighttime when somebody suggested that we play a spirit communication game. I immediately kind of piped up and asked for them to make sure that they do all the right precautionary measures to make sure nothing went awry, the usual sort of things to protect the people participating. They did so, and we all sat down in the girls' room, and this is how the game played out. Now, there's a deck of cards that are laid out face down, and each card is designated a yes or a no. You ask a yes or a no question, and you hover your hand over each card until you feel a warmth over a card, which is supposed to be the one that the spirit or whatever picks up as their answer. We initially sort of mess around, not taking it seriously, and things are relatively fine. We're getting what we believe are responses, but again, I'm really skeptical about this, and it's no biggie. As I'm sitting there, I start getting this overwhelming feeling, though, that someone is standing behind me. It's like the feeling you get when a person is right up on you, looking over your shoulder maybe. At first I think it's one of the people in the room, and so I turn around to check, but there's no one there, and the person closest to me from behind was somebody across the room laying on the bed that was a decent ways away from me. Obviously, this makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, but again, I don't put too much into it. But then I start getting these flash images in my head. I know that sounds weird, but that's the best way that I can describe it. The images were of a woman. I want to say that she had brown hair and she was dressed in white, like a wedding gown maybe. It comes to my turn with the cards and I ask, are you a man or a woman? This card for a man and this card for a woman. I do the whole routine of hovering my hand over each card one by one until I stop on the one that gives that weird warmth. I flip it over and the answer is a woman. I didn't say anything to anyone, not mentioning anything because I didn't want to freak anybody out, and obviously I wasn't too sure myself what was going on, and so the game continued. My memories are a bit hazy at this point, but what I remember was after this, I started getting the thought over and over and over that it wasn't an accident, and the feeling of someone behind me persisted. But it's hard for me to remember, and I believe that I asked the question of whether the spirit had been murdered, and I think the answer was yes, but I cannot remember very well. In any case, after the game ended, and we properly closed out the session and did our due diligence, I pulled the girl who lived in the house aside and quietly asked what she knew about the house. And she said that she really didn't know too much, but her grandparents had apparently built the house on the property, but otherwise didn't know anything about the property itself. I explained what I had experienced to her, and from what I can remember, she seemed a little bit shocked by that. We recorded the session with an audio recorder, as well as my request, but nothing ever really came up on the playback. We returned to the living room and winded down a bit. I told some stories about my own personal experiences with the paranormal because everybody was curious after I'd told them what I'd experienced. And really, that was that. It's been a long time since I've thought about this, to be honest, and even now it kind of gives me pause because there's definitely some rational explanations for the thoughts, the imagination, the daydreaming, train of thought latching onto the situation, all of that. The cards could have been a coincidence too, just chance and luck, I suppose. All sorts of possibilities are rooted in normal scientific explanations and not anything supernatural. But the thing that really sticks with me, though, is the feeling that I got of somebody standing behind me. It wasn't the stereotypical hair standing up feeling. It really truly felt like there was a solid living person standing close enough behind me that I could almost feel them, and a general presence to the point that I thought that it was one of the other people in the room, only to find out that there was no one remotely close enough that could have caused that sensation. Like I said, it all could have an explanation for sure, but it's something that has always stuck with me as really, really weird. So my mother was in a bad situation when I was 4 years old, and I lived with my grandma from the time that I was 4 to 8. I remember vividly the first time that I saw this. I was in bed, talking to my grandparents, and I felt almost like drawn to look to the hallway. I could see partly through the door as it was wood with giant holes in it, as the design, and I don't really know how to explain it, but I felt like I had to look out there, and it was a very weird feeling, I'll admit. But I looked out, and as absurd as it sounds, I saw a blue ring open up that looked like a portal, and a tall, completely black, pitch black figure stepped out. No eyes, no features, just a human if it was pitch black. It's the darkest color that I'd ever seen as well. It walked out of my eyesight. I instantly told my grandparents and was on the verge of a breakdown. However, despite my grandma being extremely into the paranormal, she just didn't believe me. I had encounters so many times. However, I can only remember 4 as I was very young, and to be honest, my whole childhood is a bit of a fever dream due to mental stuff, and no, I'm not a schizo or anything, and imagining all this. They were real and they had to be real, but that's just one of the encounters. And then there was the next one. I don't recall what order that I saw them in, but this one was a white one. I was right next to it. I was walking into the bedroom and didn't see it at first, but when I did, it was super bright, like blinding, but at the same time it sort of looked dim. I don't know the right terminology to use for its appearance, but it was the same as the black ones in terms of its height and features. It was tall and it had no features. I felt very protected when I saw this one though, almost like it was trying to warn me of something. I was close enough that I could have touched it, but being a kid, despite the feeling of being protected by it, I just ran out of the bedroom. I went and got my grandparents, but again, they didn't believe me. Now, the next time I can remember, it was in the middle of the night, maybe around 2 or 3 in the morning, and I got up to use the restroom, walking into the bathroom, and it was just sitting there on the toilet with the seat down, and it looked at me. It didn't have eyes, but I could tell that it was looking at me because it moved its head in a sort of way to acknowledge me. I instantly ran out, told my grandparents, and at this point, almost every other day I told them about it. They still didn't believe me, but I had a dream that night which I can remember as good as these encounters. My grandpa went to open the bathroom, and it was connected to the kitchen, and so was the bedroom, and the shadow person lunged at him and stabbed him in the neck, but there was no blood, and the thing had no knife or anything. It was holding something, but I couldn't see it, and it was a terrifying dream, and probably one of the worst ones that I'd ever had. After which, I told them that I would never be going to the bathroom again at night. Anyway, a week or 2, or some point after the dream and the encounter in the bathroom, I woke up one night and had to use the restroom, and pleaded for them to come with me. However, since you could literally see the bathroom from the bedroom door, they just sat up and told me that I'd be fine. I walked out and slowly opened the bathroom door. As I got a glimpse into the bathroom, there was one standing there, like it was waiting for me. I literally get chills talking about this because, as absurd as it sounds, it knew that I was coming. It was waiting for me, I'm sure of it. I ran back to the bedroom and stayed up the entire night next to my grandparents under a blanket. I cannot vividly remember any more encounters after this, but there were definitely some more. It was happening at least weekly at this stage, and my grandma recently passed, and when I moved out, when I was like 8, around the time that I was 12, she actually told me that she was sorry for never believing me, and that apparently she had seen one as well. She told me that she was laying on the couch, and we had a porch, but it was like it had walls, and I don't know the name for that sort of a room, but you walked into the house and there was that room, and then actually into the house and it was the living room. But through the door from that room to the living room, she said that she saw one staring at her through the window. She obviously got up and looked, and when she did, it wasn't there. Ever since then, she's always believed me as well, any time that I saw one. But that's another weird thing, I guess. I never saw them again after I moved out, when I was out of there. Maybe like one in the corner of my eye, perhaps, but I chalked that up to my imagination. It was never a vivid sighting of them in the same room as me like it was before. In fact, I still haven't seen anything, and I'm much older than that now. My mother told me about a week ago, though, which is why I'm sharing this now, that my grandpa had actually seen one a long time ago as well, and never really told anyone, and was just telling her for the first time. But he refused to go into any sort of detail at all, and also gets mad if you ask about the details, which is odd to me, being that I've seen these before and he knows that. But that's my experience with these things, and every time that I saw them besides the white one, I felt pure terror, unlike any kind of scared feeling that I've ever felt before. Also, as a bit of a side note, my family has a bit of a history of weird things happening to them. My great-grandma had a dream where she was attacked by something and woke up with marks all over her arm. In her house, everyone in the family says that there was a ghost in the basement. They always smelled cigars and weed coming from down there, but she never smoked, and my mom, grandpa, great-grandma, and my grandma all said all the time that there was something down there. My mother had things being moved out of place in her old houses, like paintings and things in a closet that belonged to my father, passed away when I was 3 months old, that she allegedly never touched. So I guess at least I know that I'm either not the only one that's crazy in the family, or I'm not the only one that's seeing things. If you've had any experiences similar to the portal as well that I described earlier, then please do let me know. I've never heard of a story about the shadow people with that involved, which is a bit odd, I know. Anyway, I just wanted to share my experiences, and I know I'm a bit late with this, but Happy New Year's, and I hope you guys have a great year. I've had countless paranormal and spiritual experiences as a kid, but this one, it has always stuck with me. 13 years ago, when I was around 6 or 7 years old, my mum, older sister, our little puppy and I were living in my mum's boyfriend's apartment. The apartment had 3 rooms. The room on the far left was my sister's and mine, the room on the far right belonged to my mum and her boyfriend, and the one room in the middle was what we called the middle room. We were told not to go into the middle room because it was boyfriend's mum's room or whatever, but I still sort of remember her. She was very tall and slender, standing at least 6 feet tall. She looked to be in her 70s with grey, sort of crinkly hair. We didn't see her leave the middle room much, but when she did, she would play games with my sister and me. At first, it was fun, and my older sister seemed to love her, but then I would get a dreadful, sort of uncomfortable feeling around her, so I tried to avoid her as much as I could. I think she noticed this too, because she started treating me differently, pinching me when no one was looking, pulling my hair and scratching me. Whenever I told my mother, she wouldn't believe me or would just brush it off. To be honest, my mother wasn't the greatest parent, but Even our little German Shepherd puppy didn't like her either. He would bark and growl at her every time that she came out of the room. My mum's boyfriend hated the barking and would argue with my mum about it. The fights got so bad that he eventually said that either the dog goes or we all go. My mum gave the dog away, and I remember my sister and me crying as we said goodbye to Shiloh. One day we didn't see the old lady at all again though, and I asked my sister where she was, and she just shrugged and said maybe she doesn't feel like playing today, then went back to playing leapfrog. I was happy not to see her that day. That night everyone went to bed as usual, but I woke up in the middle of the night because I needed to use the bathroom. The bathroom was right in front of the middle room, so I couldn't avoid passing by it. As I walked to the bathroom, I noticed the door to the middle room was slightly ajar, with light spilling out into the hallway. I got that bad feeling again, but I still wanted to see what was inside. I peeked through the gap in the door, and what I saw will stay with me forever. The old lady was there, but her back was turned to me, and she was twitching in a strange, unnatural way, and her skin was grey like a corpse. She smelt terrible, like rotting flesh. I just stood there, frozen, when suddenly she turned her head toward me, her eyes completely black. Her face looked grey like it was decaying, and I cried and ran back to my room, diving under the covers and praying that she wouldn't come to the door. Thankfully, she didn't. I didn't sleep much that night, but eventually I dozed off when the sun came up. When I woke up, my sister wasn't in the room, so I cautiously walked out, still pretty terrified. I found everybody sitting in the kitchen eating breakfast, but the old lady wasn't there. I ran to my mum and told her everything that I had seen. My mum's boyfriend gave her a look, and my mum looked angry and said, "What are you talking about?" I started crying and pointing to her boyfriend and said, "Your mum." My mum popped me on the arm and yelled at me to apologize. I cried and threw a tantrum because they didn't believe me. Every time I explained it all over again, my mum's boyfriend would get madder and madder, and finally he stood up, took me by my arm and dragged me to the middle room and opened the door. The room was empty. There were old clothes, old jewelry, and old purses that looked to belong to an old lady. The room smelled of dust, like no one had been in it for a long time. He dragged me further into the room and pointed to a picture on top of the dresser. In the picture, it was the boyfriend's mum, but she looked younger. Her hair was black, and she had an afro, and she was smiling. He said, "Look here, that's my mum. She died 15 years ago." I was so shocked and scared, and started crying even more, so I was sent back to my room and put into timeout. No matter how many times I told that story, no one ever believed me. The nightmares started soon after, and almost every night I'd dream of her standing at the edge of my bed laughing at me. Eventually, my mum and her boyfriend had a massive argument, and they broke up. We moved out and went to live with my grandma. Years later, when I was like 11 and my sister was 13, I asked her if she remembered the old lady, our mum's ex-boyfriend's mum. To my surprise, too, she said that she had never seen an old lady back then. She admitted that she had only played along because she figured that it was my imaginary friend or whatever. I did daydream a lot as a kid, I'll admit that, but still, even now, all these years later, I know what I saw. And to this day, still, no one believes me. So I work at a gas station, or a grocery store, I guess you could say. It's the same company, but just different buildings, in a town in West Texas. I've been with the company for quite some time now, but I've been working in the gas station for a little over a year. When I first started, everything was fine. I rarely closed. We closed at 11, which was nice, but to get more hours, I decided to start closing as well. My first closing shift, my manager put me to work in the cooler. Think big walk-in cooler with shelves on one side with a backstock and the back of the soda shelves on the other side leading to the main store. At this stage, I had heard many ghost stories from previous employees and my current co-workers that closed regularly, but I was sure that they were just tired or letting their minds wander because this job isn't that exciting, besides the occasional crackhead or Karen or whatever. But while I was in the cooler, I had an AirPod in and was listening to music one time. I was convinced, though, that either my music was glitching or that I was hearing somebody else in the cooler with me. I wasn't hearing voices, but I was hearing like presence, I guess you could say, like body noises, sniffling, occasional deep breaths, scratching, feet sliding, etc. When I would go to investigate, though, there was nothing there. These strange noises kept up for weeks while I began to close more regularly. At my store as well, the lights have a timer to save on power, so about every 15 minutes I would have to open the cooler door and push the button again. I had become very familiar with the layout of the cooler, having walked through it many times with only the glow of the outside lights peering through the shelves of sodas to guide me. And for some reason, this night in particular, it seemed to be darker when the lights were shut off, almost like the air was thick and suppressing the light or something. After about the third pass through the cooler to push the light button, I hit what I thought was the corner of the last shelf before the cooler turns, but I swear that I was nowhere close to that part of the cooler, and what I hit was almost soft, like when you put two magnets too close and they begin to repel each other. It wasn't abrupt, but a simple push from some sort of unseen force almost. After my encounter with the corner, I then immediately got cold. Sure, the cooler was obviously cold, but this was a cold that you can only achieve by wearing nothing but boxers outside during the winter for hours. I swear that my core just froze solid. It became hard to breathe all of a sudden, and I almost felt like I was starving, like I hadn't ate for months, but as fast as that feeling overcame me, it passed and I was back to normal. Well, days later I am doing an opening shift on a Sunday. In the South, many stores are closed on Sundays because of church, and the few that are open have little to no customers because of the reasons stated. It's about 5 a.m. and I'm brewing the teas for the day, and my general manager is sitting in the office doing our morning paperwork, adjusting gas prices, etc. She pops out to tell me that she has to run to the main grocery store to grab some things for our shelves. This part of the opening always scared me because I see those robbing videos on Twitter all the time, or X as it's now referred to, and we cannot lock the door with only one staff member inside, so I just continue on finishing the open tasks. It's pitch black outside and almost darker past the shelves on the cooler. While the last tea is brewing, I have a quick memory of the last guy that I had served the night before. He had gotten 4 Budweiser tall boys, and I went to push up the rest of the beer behind them in preparation for the Sunday football rush around noon. And as I reached my hand to the back of the column, I felt a cold, soft, and almost childlike hand rest on top of mine. I immediately snapped my hand back, now freezing, out of the cooler, dragging about 12 beers with it, and ran to the front door to wait for my manager. I reasoned that surely it was just my brain. I mean, I was tired, but I swear that I could have seen a shadow, or maybe like an aura is a better way to put it, or something through the small crack, illuminated by the little light that there was in the store. When my manager arrived, I held it together until we got to the office. And while I was tearing up telling her everything, brown liquid suddenly started to leak under the door. The office is adjacent to the insect counter that had the standing teapot. I opened the door and the teapot was still dispensing boiling water, even though the tea urn was completely full. The filter that held the teas, they were now on the floor, and the mystery brown liquid that we now know was tea had made its way all over the store. We reviewed the cameras and we couldn't find anything, but it was weird. I have more stories and some stories from co-workers that I'll happily include at some point and let you guys know about them, but I just wanted to share my personal paranormal experience because it's something that has always sat with me, just very uncomfortably. My oldest brother moved out when I was a little kid. I cannot even remember him living in our house, to be honest. I live with my dad and my sister. But anyways, he got into trouble with the law because of a domestic dispute involving drinking, and his wife kicked him out. My dad is a saint, so he let him move back in with us. Everything was, well, pretty fine at first, and for the first few weeks we would play card games and talk and watch TV. Then it came time for him to be sentenced to go to prison. He only ended up spending 2 months there, but when he came back, he had an entirely different demeanor and energy. The only way that I could describe it is a negativity and darkness about him. At first, you could chalk it up to him having a negative experience, but he would reminisce seemingly fondly about his experience and claim that it was no big deal. My sister and I are very spiritually sensitive. It runs in the family on the female side. There were 3 distinct instances, too, that solidified the idea that there was more going on than anything emotional or physical. The first instance, I was walking up the basement stairs when I heard footsteps at the top. I glanced up to see what looks like my brother crossing the threshold of the doorframe. I could even tell you that he was wearing blue jeans, a red polo shirt, and yellow Timberland-style boots. I walk upstairs and look around the corner, expecting to find my brother, when my dad tells me that he's actually 2 hours away in Buffalo. My dad and I were home alone, and he was wearing a blue shirt. The second instance, I had just fed the cats and decided to head upstairs to go to bed. I get halfway up the stairs before I hear a man's voice angrily yelling at me from the exact same place in the hallway where I saw the apparition. The third instance, my sister and I were pulling an all-nighter on the couch because I had a doctor's appointment in the morning. My sister says that she has to pee, so she gets up and walks towards the hallway, and then immediately proceeds to turn around and sit back down. She starts facing the wall and crying. Obviously, I ask her what's wrong and if she's okay, and she seems hesitant to tell me. After some coaxing, though, she tells me that she saw a huge shadow figure cross the hallway right at the top of the basement stairs. So, that is 3 distinct manifestations, all in the same spot with 2 different witnesses. Since it scared my sister, I decided the next day to cleanse that area, and also the space where my brother was staying. I cleansed the entire basement with sage smoke and blessed salt water, and after that, I never had anything happen again. He moved out shortly afterward, and I put together a few years later that it was a fractured part of himself, like a PK manifestation or something. And as far as I know, he's still walking around leaving pieces of himself wherever he goes. So me and 4 of my friends were in the Russian countryside this winter. We stayed at one of my friends' houses from mid-December to the beginning of January, about 20 kilometers east of Moscow. Now, on the night before New Year's, we had a terrifying encounter with, well, something horrible. It was 1:30 a.m. and we had stayed at the house all day, ate pizza, watched movies, and played Mortal Kombat. We had also been to the sauna, and had all been in pretty good spirits, as later that day would be our New Year's. We were outside my friend's house, which overlooks a very small valley, about 10 meters in depth and 60 meters in length, and we were blowing up some firecrackers that we had prepared earlier. His house is quite isolated, with the nearest neighbors about 100 meters away. We blew them up one by throwing them into the valley that was next to the house. As we were doing this, I was the first to notice a black silhouette with a glowing cigarette in the distance, moving towards us extremely fast. I immediately notified everyone with me and told them to get inside the house's courtyard. My friends saw the figure, were confused as to who it may be and what they were doing, but weren't too worried, as the figure was a pretty long way away, and we had at least 2 minutes before he came close enough to probably see our faces or do anything. I looked back at the figure and immediately noticed that his eyes had a faint glow. Nothing crazy or bright, but just a very faint sort of yellow goldish glow, similar to the way that a cat's eyes reflect light in the darkness. I also noticed that the figure had traveled a very large distance in the 5 seconds that I took to turn around and inform my friends. This was especially troubling too, because he was walking, not running. I immediately knew that it was time to leave, so I ran towards the gates of the house and yelled for my friends to follow me, which, after witnessing what I had witnessed, they obliged pretty quickly. Well, all except one of them. One of our friends looked, frozen in fear, I guess is the best way to put it. His eyes were wide open, his mouth slightly open too, and he wasn't blinking. This entire time he was looking at the figure, so I ran and pushed him in order to get him to move, which made him snap out of some sort of light trance that he was in, as he seemed almost slightly lost. By this point, the figure was about 100 meters away, and nearly at the same time, all of us were filled by a visceral feeling of dread. Not fear, but more like whatever is happening right now is very, very wrong. We later realized that this probably emanated from the man. As we were entering the garden and ducking behind the fence, we noticed that the man was moving a minimum of 5 times as fast as a regular person running, while making absolutely no noise, even though he was walking. We hid behind the fence for ages and even managed to get a picture of him from underneath the fence. He then walked into the nearby woods, leaving behind absolutely no footprints and making no noise at all. I have no clue what this was, but we are 100% that whatever this was, it definitely was not human. I have a problem that has become very real, and I need help figuring out what to do. So I'm Wiccan, and so are my roommates, but I don't really do much practicing, though they do a lot. I'll try my best to explain everything the best that I can, but you'll have to bear with me a bit here. So, before I begin, I want to say that I have talked to many psychologists and therapists, and I don't have schizophrenia or any other kind of hallucinating mental problems. I've tried to rationalize all of this for being other stuff, but at this point, it's fairly obvious that it's not that. Ever since I can remember, I've been followed by it. I don't know what it is, but I never really minded it at first. From feeling like I'm being watched, seeing shadow figures, random scars, bruises, and scratches appearing, sometimes right in front of me with nothing that could have caused them, to hearing my name being called by people that I know, only to find out that they never called me, even though I know that they did. For the longest time, I disregarded it all, even when my clay doll that I used to represent me, which was at the back of my shelf, somehow fell onto the ground, not once but twice. The first time being repairable, but the second time shattering it. I figured out around grade 6 that I was at least somewhat prone to paranormal experiences or something like that, but I certainly hadn't connected everything. I used to be extremely into creepypastas, and a lot of my experiences made me believe that Slender Man was real, and that he wanted me as his proxy. I know, but I was a kid, so don't go after me or anything. I know a good chunk of what I experienced was, just my kid brain chalking normal things up to being him. but some things just aren't easily explained away by that. For example, I read a story that said things would happen after I read it and said that Jeff the killer would come and kill me that night. Now, the stuff at school that happened was easily just my mind playing tricks on me, but still, I panicked and ended up staying the entire night locked in the washroom. I had a knife with me and everything. I was so scared that I wasn't even tired and I didn't fall asleep. But around 12 in the morning is when I heard footsteps, ones I didn't recognize, coming up the stairs. I walked up to the washroom and tested the handle. When it was locked, they knocked on the door, and of course, me being a petrified little kid, didn't respond and sat there with my tiny kitchen knife, frozen in place. They ended up pacing back and forth until 3 in the morning, when finally they walked down the stairs and left. Now, of course, this wasn't Jeff the killer or anything like that, but nothing was stolen. Nobody was hurt. There were no signs of break-in. I was fully awake, and it definitely wasn't my parents. So, what was that? About a year later, at my friend's birthday, we ended up playing some paranormal games, which I know is stupid, but again, I was a kid. The one that worked was Cat Scratch, but the thing was, when somebody else was the main person telling the story, nothing ever happened. But then it was my turn to try, and when I told the story, the person who was receiving it and was laying on my lap ended up with a large red pronounced scratch mark on their back. Now, they weren't deep and it didn't hurt them, luckily, but it was like when you scratch yourself and it's irritated but darker, and they ended up lasting all night, and I ended up doing it to all of them, and then one of my friends decided to try it on me, and it worked, but not as well as it did when I did it. But it still worked, unlike when they had done it to anyone else. The scratch marks lasted literally until the morning though, which wouldn't make sense if they were just accidental scratches. Also, the dogs were going crazy when that happened, which is a bit weird. Now, the main thing that's always been consistent is the voices calling my name. I've heard them my entire life. The scratches haven't happened in about a year, but they weren't super bad or anything. They were just small scratches and, well, to be honest, easily dismissed. I mean, some of them were fairly deep, but not too deep. The main thing that was really weird, though, was that some left scars. For example, I looked at my arm once, looked away for a moment, and then looked back, and suddenly there was a scar that hadn't been there before. That always confused me, and I have no idea what that was about. One thing happened about a year or so ago during the pandemic, though, was when I was in the kitchen washing dishes. This was when I still lived with my parents, and suddenly I just got the urge to sort of look behind me. So I did, and there was this, well, person. I don't know. Even right after it happened, my brain couldn't process what it looked like, but there was someone or something behind me. I just stared at it for a few seconds before turning right back to doing the dishes. It took me a moment to realize, but what the heck was that? I tried to rationalize it as being my brother, but when I quickly turned around again, nothing was there. At the time as well, I definitely was home alone. That was the first time that I ever really saw it. Nothing bad came from it. I mean, it didn't feel like it wanted to hurt me or anything. Sure, the scratches and the bruises and the scars weren't great, but they weren't that bad. They were just light, and really there was not much to them. The voices were confusing, I'll admit, but they weren't terrifying. The feeling of being watched was creepy, but it wasn't unbearable. This year, though, it's been very different. So, I've always had a bit of bad luck. Just bad things keep happening, but this year it has ramped up a lot. Like, I got kicked out in early December and barely managed to move in with my roommate. So much has happened too. My roommate's health has been declining badly over the last year, and doctors think that they've been having seizures. We've also had a lot of pets die this year. 4 rats, 3 birds, and a kitten. Some of the deaths were expected, like some of them were old, but others were definitely strange. For example, one bird was perfectly healthy but was found dead on the floor with no injuries. The cage was open, the water was empty, and the food was dumped, even though I had just refilled everything the day before. I found out when I got home that morning, right at 10:14 when my roommate woke up, that this must have happened. The heater got turned on all the way to hot. Now, we don't turn on the heater. The heaters are always off because we have stuff on the heaters, like actual things. Everyone here knows that it doesn't get turned on, and even then, everyone else was asleep. I wasn't home, and my roommates, they woke up and realized that I had left. One had slept through her alarm, and she had to get to work and be there in like 15 minutes, so they went and woke her up, and she raced downstairs and left literally no time at all. She goes up immediately and was gone. 5 minutes after they woke up, they smelled burning, and when they went to see what was going on, they found that the heater was on, and it was so hot that they couldn't touch it anymore. They went and looked at their thermostat in the room, and weirdly nothing had changed. They looked in the hallway and found that it was completely on hot, fully at the end as far as it could go. And it couldn't have been the cats because none of them ever jump up there, and plus, honestly, I don't know how they would even do that. Also, it just wouldn't have made any sense that they would have been all the way at the complete opposite end. I mean, it would have been somewhere in the middle or something. There wasn't anything that could have knocked it either, and really nobody would have. Even just the timing doesn't make much sense. I mean, it would have meant that the heater would have turned literally right on when my roommate got up, because it takes 5 minutes for things to heat up, and 5 minutes after that they woke up is when they started to smell the burning. And because of all that, and because of how the only thing that could have happened was something turning it on like that, we were worried that maybe, just maybe, it was now trying to burn down the house. But that wouldn't make much sense, especially if it was the thing that's been following me, because it's never done anything that extreme. But then, because of the timing, it just would have made sense for it to scare us instead of actually trying to burn the house down, which feels like a much smaller jump, but I don't know. I don't even know if I'm really explaining this properly, but the day before we had an experience that they've only ever happened once before, with a ghost that actually hurt them years ago. Suddenly all their hair just randomly stood up, completely on end, and they got goosebumps. That has only ever happened once before, and right after that, they had an experience with a ghost that hurt them. And that had happened just the day before this, yesterday. On top of that, their altar to, I believe Poseidon, they said, is allegedly feeling agitated. I've always wanted to figure out what has been following me, but now I feel like I need answers before it gets worse. I really don't know what's going on, and I hope the above makes sense, but if anyone knows anything or has any advice for us, then please do let me know. I want to start by saying that I've had paranormal experiences almost my whole life, and I've been spooked, but I've never really been scared. I've had things such as doors opening and closing, lights turning on and off, and seeing people walk by, hearing footsteps down the halls, cabinets opening, and hearing voices. But that being said, I have absolutely no idea what happened on this night, or even what to call it. Some background information I think is probably important. So this incident happened in early 2023. I was 21 and I was living with my mum and sister. Around 2020, I got really into spiritual things such as crystals, tarot, and read a ton on witchcraft, but kind of lost interest in it. My room was a safe space. I always had a feeling that nothing bad or negative could get in, as I was always burning incense and things like that. We also had 4 dogs, 2 cats, and my room was directly across from my mum's. My bed was set up against my wall, under the window and access from my door. Also, my sister and her boyfriend have 2 dogs. One lived with us while the other stayed at his place, and this night they were both there, and my sister always has the door shut at night with her dogs in her room. My mum was over at her boyfriend's for the night as well, and my sister and her boyfriend sleep in their room when she's not home because it's colder in my mum's room all the time. So, I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. In the process of getting up, my boyfriend at the time also woke up. Down the hall was the bathroom, which always had a nightlight on, and as I was walking to the bathroom, I saw our childhood dog Barkley just sort of laying on the floor outside of the bathroom. I reached down and pet him for a minute before going to the bathroom. I walked out and pet him again and went back to my room. As I was walking back, I saw my mum's door was shut, so I left my door cracked in case Barkley tried to come and sleep in my room like he usually does. I got back into bed, and me and my boyfriend talked for a minute when all of a sudden my door pushed open, and my sister's boyfriend's dog, Luna, came into the room. She's an extremely energetic dog, so she jumped straight onto the bed and started jumping and licking both of us. I pushed her off and she just left the room, and I leaned off the bed and pushed the door shut more, but still cracked open, and you could still see a good amount of the light coming from the nightlight in the bathroom. I remember us both being confused and talking about how weird it was that she wasn't locked up in my mum's room with my sister and her boyfriend, but didn't think too much about it. I'm not sure what time it was, but my blinds were open, so I knew that it was still dark. I was laying on my back, and my boyfriend put his head on my chest facing my closet, and we were just talking. I remember just looking at my door as a black shadow figure was staring right back at me. It was just an outline with no facial features at all, and the way that it was positioned, it looked like somebody was just leaning over and peeking their head into the room. But as I'm staring at this figure, I'm telling myself that it could be the cats on the bathroom counter, just casting a weird shadow, and I was waiting for my boyfriend to turn his head to the door, and then ask him what he thought it was since it so clearly looked like a person. I was probably staring at this thing for a solid minute when I felt my boyfriend turn his head to face the door, and as soon as he turned his head, the figure backed out of view. I gasped and shoved him off of me, shot straight up with my back against the wall, and I couldn't talk. I was absolutely horrified. I was hyperventilating, so I couldn't even talk, to be honest, but he started freaking out, asking me what's going on and what's wrong, and I finally was able to say that someone is in the hall, and after a few minutes, he went through the house and he confirmed that no one was there. I was freaked out, but what was even scarier was that I had him go into the hall and recreate it. He was 6'4", so he's not short by any means, but he barely reached where this figure was. This thing would have been at least 7 feet tall to lean into the doorway like that and still be near to the top of it. I calmed down a bit when I heard my sister's boyfriend's alarm go off in my mum's room, so I knew that it was around 6 a.m. I then shouted his name for him and my sister to come into my room. My door was now wide open, so when my mum's bedroom door opened, we were both confused to see Luna run into the room and jump on us for a second time. We were both just looking like, what the heck is going on? They both came into the room, and as soon as I started telling them what had happened from the beginning, my sister stopped me and said, "What are you talking about? Luna and Barkley have been in the room with us the whole time." I was so freaked out, asking everyone if I was sleeping and pinching myself, but I was awake. In the end, I ended up falling asleep when the sun came up, and I asked my boyfriend if he remembered what happened, and he said yes, so I know that I wasn't dreaming. I still have no idea what happened that night too. I don't know if it was a bunch of paranormal stuff or if it was something else, but it was weird. I moved out of my mum's in September of 2023 and gave away most of the spiritual stuff to a girl who comes into my work. I now live with my childhood best friend and her boyfriend, about 30 minutes away from my mum's, and have seen shadows 2 other times. We have weird stuff happen still, but we just say that it's her dad or grandpa since both their ashes are in the house, and that's just what we say. I was with a guy that I was talking to though, and we got into an argument, and he was hugging me in the dark on my bed once, and I could see shadows bouncing around my room behind him. It could have just been my eyes, I admit, but again, I pushed him off of me and I couldn't talk, and just had an awful feeling suddenly come over me. I saged our house the next day, and I have only ever had one other experience since then. What happened was, there was a tall shadow standing outside of my doorway a few months ago, but I'm just telling myself that it was my friend's dad watching over the house. Truthfully though, I don't know what I saw of any of these times, but I sure would love to hear other people's opinions on what this is, and if I can do anything about it. I'm a skeptic, and always have been, and probably always will be one. Do I have ghost stories of my own? Absolutely, but most of them can be easily explained away with seeing something wrong in the lighting or getting something confused. This, though, is the one that I have literally never been able to figure out. It was 5 years ago, so my memory is admittedly a little bit hazy, but I'm sure about what happened. I was at one of those school camps, the type where they take you an hour into the woods and you sleep in a high-quality cabin. They'd messed up the booking, though, and accidentally put too many people in the cabin made up of my friends. So I offered to switch to the one with an available bed and went to sleep around the same time as the other girls in the room. I woke up in the middle of the night, though, which, okay, super common, but the timing of it and what happened after is what makes me question the why of waking up. So, like I said, I opened my eyes to see that every single bed in the room is completely empty, made and flat, no bumps at all. These girls were all very tall and would have been easily visible under the covers. They had definitely been there before I had gone to sleep, and the issue wasn't the darkness either, because I could see the beds themselves very clearly, but again, completely flat. I'm obviously pretty confused by this, so I get up and check on the beds closer. They're also flat. Okay then, maybe they all got up and left? I guess I just have to go and find them. I exit my room and enter the cabin hallway to darkness, then open the other room, my original room, to see the beds full and all of them sleeping. By this point I'm confused and end up deciding that these must be my roommates and they'd switched rooms to get away from me or something. I have a bit of a back and forth with everyone in the cabin, waking all of them up. I know, kind of rude, but finally figured the situation out and I go back into the hallway. But here's the second weird part. When I got back there was no door. Our room was the one at the end of the hallway. You couldn't miss it or confuse it with any other door. But instead, I find myself staring at an empty wall. To be clear, I was having no issue seeing the other doors in the dark, but I end up opening the wrong dorm room again and get yelled out only to turn around again and see a very clearly visible door at the end of the hallway. I was in the same position as before, with no increase in vision or in clarity or anything. The door wasn't hard to see in the dark at all either, and when I enter, there are all my roommates, also clearly visible as large lumps in the beds. It didn't even take me a second to notice them. They couldn't have left and come back either. I mean, I spent about 3 minutes in the hallway, the only entrance to the room, and about 2 minutes in the wrong dorm, and even if they had managed to sneak back in during the 2 minutes that I was in the other dorm, then all gotten into bed and gone to sleep in the next minute or two, I would have been able to hear them moving for sure. No one was making any noise since they were all tired and the cabin had elevated wooden plank floors, which means that it was loud and any kind of footsteps echoed everywhere and you could hear it. Can I be sure that it was really paranormal? Well, no, but I've never been able to figure out why any of this happened, where the people in the door went, why they came back like it was nothing. It couldn't have been visual issues because I had no issue seeing, like I said. The issue was that I could very clearly see completely empty beds, though. To clarify things as well that I've been asked about by friends while talking about this, there were no windows in the room that were big enough for anyone to get out of, and doing so would have required moving something to stand on and then all of them jumping out of the window that didn't even fit them and landing on the ground without creating enough noise to wake me up or leaving something behind. They couldn't have been hiding anywhere either because I had the bottom bunk and could see the empty bottom of each bed. The room was pretty much empty other than that too. It also couldn't have had to do with sleep because it wasn't a dream. My friends in the other dorm all agreed on what had happened on their end, just as I remembered it too. It couldn't have been sleepwalking either, as I was fully conscious and capable of thinking out full sentences and debating actions in my head and all of that. What I mean is that the memory isn't hazy like a dream would be. I guess the only way that this would work would be if sleepwalking was indistinguishable from being awake, but then why would I remember what happened in one dorm correctly and seeing things in another? Overall, it's impossible for them to have snuck out in the night, is what I'm getting at. I would have heard them or seen them. Teachers on the complete opposite side of the cabin were woken up by me walking around in the night too, and I would have heard movement right behind me. And it's also impossible for me to have been asleep. So, what the heck happened that night? When I was little, about 7 to 8 years old, but it could have been as late as 10 to 11, I don't remember exactly, but while I was in the country house where I spent my summers, my family and I were lying on deck chairs, arranged in a bit of a circle, looking at the night sky in search of shooting stars. It must have been August, and we were just sitting there, and at a certain point I saw a bright dot enter the starry sky with a certain speed. Not too fast, but certainly determined and confident, I guess you could say. It looked like one of those planes that I saw during the day, the ones that left a trail behind them, and they went faster than civilian flights. But this one, it didn't leave any trail. It was like a star that went very fast. With the knowledge that I have now, I would have said that it was a satellite perhaps, but the point is that at a certain point this satellite just stopped, and it did so in correspondence with a star that it was in front of. It was as if it was hiding by placing itself in front of that star, and in the space of a few seconds, it moved towards another star, positioned next to that one, effectively breaking the trajectory that a common object like a plane or a satellite should have maintained. And then it broke 3 or 4 more times, maybe even more, always hiding in correspondence with a star. The sensation that I experienced was that I was being observed all of a sudden, and that this object knew that we were there, to the point of being able to hide perfectly behind the stars that we saw. I also remember neatly my aunt saying, "But how does it do it? It's impossible." Today, however, I'm really the only one who remembers this. For this reason, I've always thought that perhaps, given the taste of the whole experience, that it could have been a dream or something that I never fully believed because I have so many strange dreams, but none that I remember clearly after years and years like this. Unless I write it down somewhere, and I never wrote this one down anywhere. This dream survives everything, and it's clear and distinct as only memories can be. Plus, my family does remember sitting out there looking at the stars at night, So there's that too, I guess. Just a few days ago as well, talking to a friend, I was told that she had the same experience, and that she had it when she was about 20 years old. She is absolutely sure that it was not a dream as well. She was with a friend and pretty much saw the exact same thing above a beach in Sicily. I saw it in the countryside near Palermo, on the other side of the region. The only difference is that her luminous objects moved along irregular, slightly curved trajectories, while mine moved along perfect lines. Two years ago, me and my family moved across states and moved into my current home. We usually have a lot of people in our house, and my family is usually outside on the porch. Some family was supposed to be flying back to the state that we moved from that day too. Now, I was getting home from school last year and was walking through the door. My mum was walking past into her room and I called out to her. She didn't answer me though, so I just sort of brushed it off because she does have pretty bad selective hearing. My dad was outside smoking, so I went outside and gave him a kiss and a hug to let him know that I got home. I sat down and told him that I saw my mother walking into her room and joked that she ignored me. My dad gave me a confused look and told me that she was at the airport dropping some people off. I thought that he was joking with me and laughed, saying that she probably forgot something and was just getting it, and I pulled up my phone to look at her location to prove that she was here, and it said that she was 45 minutes away at the airport. My dad looked at me weird again and said, "I told you so." But the thing with my mum is that she's kind of short. My sisters and I are all a couple of inches taller than her, in fact. She also dyes her hair like an orange color, and one of my sisters has black hair, and the other one is like a dirty blonde, which means that no one really looks like her, so it couldn't have been them. But the real kicker to this story is that maybe about a week ago or something like that, we were talking about ghost experiences in a group of me, my dad, and my mum. I retold my story and my dad got this sort of look on his face. He does that face when he doesn't want to say something scary, but I pressed him on it and it turns out that something similar had happened to him too. My dad's from Morocco and his mum visits from time to time in the States. And one time, when she was supposed to be in Morocco, he saw her walking up the steps to go upstairs. He was home alone because me and my sisters, we were at school or work and my mum was at my aunt's house that day. He chills on the couch a lot, and from sitting where he usually does, you can see the top portion of the stairs in our home. He, being the man that he is, walked up the stairs after he saw that, and she disappeared upstairs. But he gets upstairs anyway and sees her walk into the room that she would use when she lived with us. My dad abruptly walked into the room, convinced that she was somehow here, but obviously no one was in there. So, apparently we have an entity that likes mimicking mothers. Oh, and by the way, I saw my mother completely solid. It genuinely looked like my mum, even right down to wearing what she wore that morning. I currently work the overnight shift at a residential treatment facility for troubled youth. Our original facility was out in the country, and it was originally a hunting cabin before being refurbished and added onto for this purpose. That facility, it closed down recently and relocated to a more central facility in the city, which used to be a home for young mothers. Now, I've had multiple experiences at both locations. Despite my prior history of paranormal occurrences, I don't usually assume that every weird thing is paranormal, especially with my graveyard shift hours. I mean, I sometimes might chalk them up to just the effects of fatigue or whatever. But my experiences were validated after sharing them with some co-workers who had worked there a lot longer than I have. You see, in our old facility, from my office, you could see directly down the hallway, off of which were clients' rooms. One night, out of the corner of my eye while doing some paperwork around 4 a.m., I saw a pale shape or figure emerge quickly from one of the rooms and then dart back inside without making a sound. Since I wear glasses, my peripheral vision is very blurry, and since I saw this out of the corner of my eye, I figured that it must have been one of the clients. It seemed unusual though, because the clients don't wear anything that is pale or whitish in color like that. Also, why would they dart out and back in so quickly in the middle of the night like that? It was suspicious either way, and so as soon as I saw it, I got up and quickly went to the doorway in question to see if the clients were okay. It took me about 5 seconds to cover the distance, and when I got there, the clients were clearly very asleep. And I mean, there's just no way anyone could have gotten out of bed, into the hallway, and back into bed so quickly without making a single sound, or seeming so convincingly asleep, since it was quiet enough and the building is old enough that I could have even heard when clients simply turned over in their bed. That was the most noticeable one there, but there were other times I saw shadowy figures out of the corner of my eye, but they were gone so quickly when I looked closer that they might have been just my imagination. Also, though, there was a time when there was a set of curtains rustled and moved slightly on their own, even though there was no draft that could have even moved them. I checked, there were no vents nearby, all the windows were shut and locked, there was no wind outside that day either, and nothing else had moved near them. After relating my sighting, though, of the pale figure to a co-worker, they just sort of laughed at me and said that it must have been the lady in white. Apparently, multiple staff and clients over the years had reported seeing a female figure in white. No idea who it could have been, though. I also heard stories of kitchen cabinets opening and closing on their own, books flying off of bookshelves, and multiple sightings of shadow figures. Now, at our new facility, the one that used to be a home for young mothers, the activity has died down considerably, though this facility has its own share of spooks, that's for sure. On one of my first nights here, I heard footsteps in the hallway approaching the office. In this facility, the office is on the corner, and you can't really see anything from inside except the opposite hallway wall. You have to leave the office to see down either hallway. So I assumed it was a client awake and about to ask for something. I peeked my head out the door, but when I did, there was nobody there. The footsteps sounded light and fast, though, like a child's perhaps. This facility is very well lit, even at night, and if someone were approaching the office, you could see their shadow on the wall before you actually saw them. And one night, I swore that I saw what looked like a person's shadow moving across the wall in the way that you'd expect an actual person to follow. So again, I peeked my head out, but there was no one there. A couple of other times, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the edge of a figure passing by the office window, as if they'd just passed by and were going down the hall. Both times, what little I saw of the figure before it disappeared just sort of appeared black and adult-sized, I guess. I've also heard footsteps a couple of other times, including with a new co-worker who I was training one night. That was kind of nice, honestly, because I knew for sure that it wasn't just my imagination and me going crazy, as he definitely heard them too, and got freaked out by it like I did. In any case, I related these occurrences to my new supervisor, who has worked in this building for a long time. They shrugged them off and just stated very matter-of-factly that the building is haunted. Before my current company took over management of this facility, it had previously been run by a Catholic religious organization, and it had been staffed by nuns. My supervisor told me that they and others have seen figures of nuns in the hallways before, as well as the apparition of a young girl. They suspect that might have been what has been making this childlike footsteps that I keep hearing. Also, before my own experiences here started, my supervisor did warn me that I might hear strange noises at night, but that there were usually nothing to be concerned about. None of these things have really freaked me out much, I guess, but I mostly just find it weird and sort of interesting and amusing, I guess. and I actually enjoy being in this place where co-workers have also experienced things, so I don't feel so alone or feeling like I can't tell anyone because I'm afraid that they'll think that I'm crazy or a liar or whatever. It is the first job that I've worked where paranormal occurrences are so commonplace that they're believed. I wonder if it's because of all the negative energy surrounding our troubled clients, perhaps. I won't pretend to know that I have the answers, but this is the story that I have, and I swear by it. Right now, I'm 22, I'm male, and when I was around 9 or 10, I don't remember the exact age, my father asked me if I wanted to go with him to repair an old lady's broken television. My parents at the time were divorced, so my mother had no idea about this whole trip. Back then, I knew my father was often sad because of the divorce and being forced to see his kids less, and I knew that he just wanted to spend more time with me, so I said sure, why not? Even though I would have much rather stayed home to just play video games. This old lady lived in a small village, 20 minutes away with car from our town. When we arrived, everything was pretty much normal. I mean, you could see some people on the streets here and there, and once we arrived at the lady's address, I only saw one person on the street. He was a man in his mid-30s with unkempt black hair and dirty clothes. He was either on his way to do his daily farm duties or he was already done with them and was on his way to the pub. We parked in front of the lady's house and rang the doorbell on her gate. The entrance door was a bit far from the gate, so we couldn't hear if the doorbell was working or not, and also couldn't see it because it was on the other side of the house. 2 minutes pass and there's no answer. We rang again. Another 2 minutes passed and nothing. By the third time that we rang, I was already hopeful that the lady just wasn't here and that I'll be able to go back home and play on my PC. 5 minutes later this time, but no answer again. My father tried calling the lady, but there was no answer to the phone either. He kept calling her over and over again, but he never got an answer. At this point, we must have been in front of the gate for like half an hour, until the man that I saw earlier came back and approached us. He asked us if we were looking for the lady who lives there. We obviously answered yes and told him that she's not answering to her doorbell or phone. The stranger immediately proposed us with an idea. I'm trying to remember this exactly as best as I can, but it was something like, I know a way around her gate, we can get into her garden that way. Which was obviously a bit weird, but because me and my father had been waiting there for quite a while at this point, neither of us questioned it, and my father agreed to it. So my father proceeded to follow the man and walk around the lady's gate. I was left there alone for a while. I forgot to mention too that this whole thing happened around noon, so it was much less scarier for me. My child brain could only be scared if it was dark outside at the time. Otherwise, this was just rather boring. But around 10 minutes later, my father and the other man shows up in front of the gate and opens it from the inside. And they both looked rather taken aback. I remember my father saying, "I'm going to go back, you stay here with the stranger," and I agreed. A couple of seconds later, when we were alone, the stranger starts talking to me. I'm vaguely quoting him again, but it was something like, "Dude, the old lady that you came here to see is dead in front of the door. She's naked, laying on her stomach, and there's blood everywhere." That was it. That was all that he said to me. He also asked my name, if I remember right, but that was pretty much our entire conversation until my father came back, with a much more concerned face. He and the man started talking about the next steps. The stranger started explaining how that morning he saw another man entering the lady's garden the same way as he and my father had just done, and walked towards the front door but never seemed to come back out again. He started blaming himself that he could have stopped all of this from happening if he had just cared a little bit more. But at the time, honestly, neither of us could blame him. My father called the police, obviously, and we were told to stay there until they arrive. While we were waiting, another person showed up, around the same age as the other man with similar dirty clothes. The two strangers started talking to each other. The guy told everything to the other person the same way as he told me. I don't think he did it too because he didn't feel the weight of the situation. He just probably didn't know any better. But the cops arrived about 15 minutes later. A few of them went inside the house while two of them started questioning my father. After a few questions, he turned to me and said, "Hey, I know a friend in this village and you're gonna go stay at their place, alright? Until I'm done talking with the police." I think he did this because he knew that if my mother was told about this situation, she would have made sure that I'd never see him again. So I did as he said. Sometime later, a middle-aged lady approached us though and walked away with me to a house close by. I was welcomed by a family with 3 to 4 children. I don't remember exactly, but that doesn't matter either way, but at this time I still had no idea what was going on because the concept of sexual assault and murder was non-existent to me. The only thing that I knew was that the old lady in the house was dead, and now I have to stay with this family until the police is done with my father. The lady sat down next to me with her husband and they started talking to me that it's going to be alright and that I don't have to worry about my father. She's going to take care of me until he's done with the police. All of this at the time meant absolutely nothing to me. I was so clueless of the situation as a kid that I didn't even answer her reassurances. I just turned to the window and watched as my father was still talking to the cops. As the day went on, the family members of the house got more and more depressed. The lady even started crying. I knew that she was crying because of the whole situation, but only later I realized how truly dark the whole thing was. One day, the old lady in the neighborhood is happily living her life, and the next day she's just dead. No more kind regards from her or cheering waves in the morning, just a house with, well, no one inside. Around 10 o'clock, the lady gets a phone call and tells me that my father is done with the police and I can finally go home with him. As I reunite with my dad, we both get into the car and drive home. Neither of us said anything about what had just happened in the past 10 hours. My father is pretty bad with communication, honestly. Not clinically bad, he doesn't have any conditions or anything, but he's just sort of bad at it. When we got home, I went to my bed and honestly, I slept just fine. The next day, everything was normal, like nothing even happened. I didn't say a word to my mother when the weekend ended because I didn't want to get my father in trouble. Now that I think about it too, I don't think I ever told her about this whole incident. Anyway, 2 weeks later, my big sister comes in the morning with the news about a local doctor getting arrested for sexually assaulting and murdering an elderly woman in her doorway. Me and my father exchanged a look, and I remember him saying something about it, but I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. After that too, I never heard about the whole story ever again. After all of these years, the whole situation still feels like a memory that just never happened. So much so that 2 years ago, I asked my father if it actually happened, or if I'm just remembering a childhood nightmare or something. But of course, he said that it did happen, and that really, it wasn't a dream. So this started about a month ago when I was house sitting for my brother while he and his wife were on an anniversary trip. I was just sleeping there for the night and fell asleep on their couch, since it felt weird to sleep in their bed. I couldn't find a blanket and there wasn't one on the couch, but when I woke up, I had one on me. I asked my mum if she had gone by and put one on me, since my brother lives literally 5 minutes from her. But she said no and that she was too tired to drive there that night. Anyway, a couple of days later, I told my sister-in-law about this, and she said my nephew, her son who's 3, had been seeing things and said that he saw a skinny person walking around there, but there was no one there obviously. I started calling it Toby because that's the name of the demon in Paranormal Activity, and my mum called it Red Rum. Now, my name is Joseph, and my nephew, who can't speak well, always calls me Yorvis. This is important because last week I was taking him to the local arcade, and he went to my brother asking him for quarters, yelling out, "Yorvis, Yorvis," and I was walking behind him, and I heard clear as day a woman whisper Yorvis as I was walking past the living room. Seriously, it sounded as if it was whispered right in my ear. And I mean, it couldn't have been my sister-in-law because she was on the other side of the house and no one was near me besides my nephew. Finally, though, my sister-in-law said that night that her and my brother woke up to a golf ball being dropped in their kitchen. But she went out to look in case it was just my nephew playing, since he does play with them a lot, but when she got there was no golf ball anywhere, nothing near there in fact. My sister-in-law told me to take back whatever I did because she's worried that it's a demon, while my brother is the horror movie husband, you could say. They live in a small house that's kind of old, but I don't think anyone died there, and I don't know, it's just kind of weird, and really, I don't know what to do about it. So I just got back from a trip to New York City. I go there multiple times a year as I have family and a handful of close friends that live there. I've been meaning to share this since it happened a couple of nights ago, but I wanted to make sure that I had the time to sit down and really regather all the details correctly. And look, I'm sure we've all had those crazy subway stories at one point or another in our lives, but genuinely, I never thought that I would end up in one this terrifying. So, I was heading back to my hotel from a friend's house at about 3 a.m. the other night. A friend lives deep in Brooklyn, my hotel was in Manhattan, so if you know the city, then you know that that's about a 30 to 45 minute long train ride, give or take. My friend finally arrived and I was happy to be headed home. I was exhausted and it was really late. My trip had been going unexpectedly well up until this point, so I had faith that I would be able to get home with no worries, especially since the trains and the streets were basically empty at this hour. The train was brand new and had just been cleaned, something that I've never even seen before, to be honest. Heck, it even smelled like a new car, and still had fresh mop water on the floor. There was only about 3 other people on my train, all minding their own business. So far so good, right? Well, about 2 stops into the train ride, a man that looked like maybe he was in his late 20s stumbled into our train car mid-ride through the connecting doors of the cars. He had on a Nike ski mask, which usually isn't a good sign on a nice 70-degree night in general context, but I'm not one to judge by appearance. Plus, I know the shiesty mask is sort of a trend nowadays, so I didn't think too much of it at first. He sort of hobbled in, and he was clutching his stomach, almost as if he was concealing something or hiding a wound. His eyes were bloodshot red, and at first I thought that it was because he was high or something. He immediately hobbled into the nearest corner, and sort of sulked in the corner, facing it until the next stop. He then ran out the closest door and erupted into the most painful crying that I've ever heard. He was just screaming, moaning, and crying, all while running sort of alongside the stopped train on the platform, still clutching his stomach, screaming things like "why" and gasping through his tears. Keep in mind, I'm sitting in the middle of the train facing away from the side that he got off, so I'm kind of breaking my neck behind me as he's running behind me to watch what's going on. He then ran back inside the same car, through the door on the opposite side of the car now. He was on my right before, but now he's on my left. There's no one in between me and him now, since everyone else is closer to the right side. He did the sulking while facing into the corner thing on the other side of the car now, but this time he kept scream-crying and yelling things like "why" again, but he was crying so hysterically that it was hard to make out a lot of what he was saying. From the certain words that I gathered, though, I'm almost positive that a very close friend of his had just gotten killed or something, I guess. It's really the only thing that would explain the way that he was acting and the things he was saying. Plus, he was suited up like he had just come back from a street mission gone bad or whatever. At this point, Everyone on the train was frantically flicking their eyes over to him every few seconds. You could tell that they were panicked but not trying to cause a scene about it or rile him up anymore. I was getting a little sussed out myself, but I had seen and heard about worse on the subway, and if someone that he knew had really just died, then honestly I sort of felt horrible for the guy before anything else. But then, the entire situation escalated to a point that I had only ever seen in movies or crime shows until now. The man stayed in this corner crying and screaming and muttering things to himself for about another 3 minutes or so, all while continuing to clutch his stomach as if he was concealing something. I had definitely seen a black object in his hand too by this point, but I couldn't tell if it was big enough to be a gun or not. After I saw this, I tried not to take my eyes off of him for too long at a time, since I was the closest person to him, but I also didn't want to stare. He was starting to say concerning things though, like, someone's going to pay for this, and then he would just repeat it louder and louder, and then he burst into a dialogue that genuinely made my heart drop. Keep in mind, he's still facing the corner, hunched over, clutching his item. He then says, "All of you sitting on this train right now, you're all going to feel me tonight. You hear me? You're all going to feel me tonight. And you're all going to hate it too. Oh man, you're all going to hate it." He kept getting louder and louder as if he was saying this to the point where he was basically screaming by the last part. I don't know what he said after that, because as soon as that train stopped next, I just absolutely bolted. He was screaming at me as I got off, but I couldn't hear it, and I definitely wasn't trying to turn back. I ran back up to the nearest street exit, chain smoked a couple of cigarettes, and I waited 20 minutes for the next train to come. I've seen enough in my life to know that this wasn't a situation that I was willing to gamble with at all. I do pray that the last 3 people on that train got home safe and nothing happened. I briefly searched Twitter and the news the next day for any possible information that I could find, but I didn't see anything. Honestly though, who even knows what's worth a headline to them down there anymore?